The night they told me I was no longer their daughter, I was holding a positive pregnancy test and shaking from the cold outside their mansion gates. "Hi, I'm Ava Montgomery. I was 18 when my family chose reputation over love and left me to figure life out alone. But I didn't just survive. I built something they couldn't ignore. A life on my terms, with a son who became my anchor, and a business they never saw coming. And then, they showed up again. This time, with letters, checks, and tears. Have you ever been hurt by the people who were supposed to protect you? Tell me in the comments, would you have let them back in or close the door for good? They say a name carved in stone lasts forever. Mine still clings to the front of a building, bold, capitalized, engraved in limestone, but no one says it out loud anymore. Not in that house, not in this town, not even me. Steam rose from my mug as I poured coffee into it, the scent of dark roast grounding me like an old friend. I stood at the small window above the kitchen sink, looking out across the square. There it was, the Whitmore Gallery. Its windows shuttered, the sign still intact. It hadn't changed in years, and yet everything had. I took a sip and leaned against the counter, the ceramic warm in my palms. "Mom," Ethan's voice chirped behind me, full of excitement. "I finished it." I turned to see him standing barefoot on the wooden floor, holding up a sheet of watercolor paper. A squirrel, small and curled under a tree, shaded with careful browns and grays. There was something haunting in the eyes, like it had been waiting too long for someone to come back. I knelt down beside him. "You notice so much. That's a beautiful piece, sweetheart." His cheeks flushed, proud but uncertain. "It looked really lonely. Remember the one we saw in the park yesterday? It just sat there. I thought maybe it missed someone." I brushed my fingers through his soft hair. Maybe it did. He didn't know that he had just drawn my heart. We ate breakfast quickly, scrambled eggs and toast with strawberry jam, and packed up our art supplies for class. Ethan liked to carry his own sketchbook in a tote bag that was nearly half his size. On our way out, he skipped over fallen leaves, narrating an imaginary conversation between the squirrel and a friendly robin. His world was full of dialogue, color, feeling, like mine had been once. As we crossed the street, the gallery came into full view. The window displays were covered in white paper, the interior dark. I used to imagine that building as a kingdom. One day, I'd hang my work in there and make my parents proud. Now it was just a reminder, not of failure, but of how easily people rewrite who belongs and who doesn't. We walked past it without a word. The Community Art Center sat on the other side of the square, bathed in morning light. The hallway smelled faintly of glue and old linoleum. Inside, I set up the classroom. Child-sized chairs, plastic palettes, tubs of washable paint. The kids trickled in, some giggling, some shy, each with a story in their hands. "Ms. Ava," one of them whispered, "can I draw a dragon with a baby bottle?" "You can draw whatever feels true," I smiled. "That's the best kind of art." About halfway through class, Mrs. Helen Duvall peeked in, her silver hair pulled into a bun, wire-rimmed glasses sliding down her nose. "I saw some of your latest pieces in the back room," she said after class, her voice warm but serious. "They're honest, brave." I wiped green paint from the corner of a table. "They're just therapy on canvas." "Which is exactly why people need to see them." She paused. "We're planning the fall community showcase. I think you should submit." I looked up, startled. "Me? You paint like someone who's made peace with pain. That matters." I didn't know how to respond. My last exhibit had been in high school, before everything fell apart, before Liam, before I became the person I never expected to be. Quiet, behind the scenes, holding it all together with duct tape and soft words. "I'll think about it," I said. When class ended, Ethan helped me clean brushes and pack the materials. He hummed softly to himself, focused as ever. Afterward, we walked home as the sky deepened into amber. Back in our apartment, he climbed onto his little stool and helped stir spaghetti sauce while I boiled noodles. "Mom," he said suddenly, "why don't we ever visit Grandma and Grandpa?" The spoon clinked against the pot. I swallowed the knot in my throat. "They live far away," I said, careful not to add more. "Are they nice?" I hesitated. "They used to think they were." Ethan didn't ask more. Instead, he pulled down the box of grated cheese and sprinkled it across the sauce with concentration only a 5-year-old could summon. Dinner was quiet but peaceful. We talked about dragons and squirrels and whether clouds could hold hands. I washed dishes while Ethan sat on the floor nearby, drawing in his sketchbook again, brow furrowed in thought. Then I saw it. An envelope half tucked under the front door. I hadn't heard the mail slot creak. There was no knock. Just that silent, sudden appearance. I dried my hands, heart beginning to drum. I picked it up. The handwriting was familiar in the way a scar is, something you didn't ask for but learned to recognize. I traced the loops of each letter. Ava. No return address, no seal, just my name. I didn't open it. Not right away. Instead, I sat on the floor next to Ethan, the envelope in my lap, watching him draw a girl and a squirrel under a tree. I stared at the handwriting for what felt like an hour. Maybe longer, because deep down I already knew whose hand had written it. I slid the envelope into the kitchen drawer, its edges brushing against loose paper clips and expired coupons. I didn't need to open it. Not yet. Some messages carry weight even before they're read. My hand lingered on the drawer handle, then fell away. I turned off the light and stepped into the quiet of my bedroom, but my mind was already slipping back to the kitchen of another house, another life. It was late winter, 2017, the kind of afternoon that looks bright but feels cold, with a sky the color of polished silver. I stood in my parents' kitchen, 18 years old, still smelling like the hallway of my high school. My coat was damp from walking, and my shoes left faint puddles on the marble tile. My mother stood at the counter, peeling an apple with practiced precision. Her hair was pinned perfectly, her blouse crisp, not a wrinkle in sight. She looked up when I stepped in. "If this is about the art school again, Ava," she sighed, "we've already discussed this." "It's not," I said. My voice wobbled before I could steady it. "I need to talk to you. It's important." She paused, knife hovering above the apple. "Then talk." I looked toward the study. My father sat behind the frosted glass door, flipping through an art auction catalog completely at ease. I wondered what peace felt like in a house that worshipped image. "I'm pregnant," I said. The knife slipped from her hand and hit the counter with a sound that felt louder than it was. She didn't speak, just stared. For a moment, I thought she might have misunderstood me. "I took 3 tests," I added. "It's real." My father emerged from the study, eyes sharp. "With who?" "Dylan." He folded his arms. "The boy with no prospects? No family worth naming?" "I love him," I whispered, "and I want to keep the baby." My mother's expression barely changed, but her voice grew cold. "You think love pays for diapers?" "She's throwing her future away," my father said. "For what? Emotion? Do you understand what people will say?" "I don't care what they say," I replied. "I care what I do, what I become." "And what you're becoming," he said slowly, "is not a Montgomery." There was no shouting, just a coldness that spread like frost. "You'll leave tonight," he added. "We'll have your things packed. You won't come back here, not until you're willing to be someone else." I stood frozen. I didn't argue. Not because I agreed, but because I knew it wouldn't matter. That night, I packed what I could into my backpack, a change of clothes, a sketchbook, a few dollars from the jar I kept hidden under my bed. I left without a word. It was raining lightly when I reached the school steps. I found the driest corner I could and curled up on the concrete, pulling my coat tight. I had my phone in my hand for half an hour before I finally called Dylan. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Hey, what's up?" "I'm pregnant." Silence. Then a breath. Then, "Are you sure?" "I've taken 3 tests." He sighed. "Ava, I can't be a dad. I just got the NYU letter. I leave next month. Then take me with you. We'll figure it out. I can't do that. You know I can't. My parents are barely helping me. And a kid? I said nothing. He filled the silence with a sentence I still hear when it's quiet enough. You're strong. You'll be okay. Then the line went dead. I stayed there all night. My coat soaked through, my stomach hollow. I stopped crying around midnight, too tired to keep going. It was nearly dawn when I heard footsteps. I didn't lift my head until I heard my name. Ava? I blinked. There, framed against the morning gray, stood Mrs. Duval. She was wearing a raincoat, a grocery bag in one hand, her keys in the other. What happened? She asked, kneeling in front of me. Her voice was low, calm, not demanding. I couldn't answer. I just shook my head, tears slipping again without permission. You're coming with me, she said. You don't have to explain yet. Her car smelled like cinnamon gum and old newspapers. I didn't say much on the drive. She didn't ask. When we arrived, she led me to a small cottage behind her house. It was tiny, just a bed, a desk, and a faded curtain. But it was warm. It was safe. You can stay here as long as you need, she said. I nodded. I didn't have any words left. The weeks after that blurred into a rhythm, school during the day, rest at night. I helped her cook, clean, keep her garden alive. I submitted assignments. I studied art education. My stomach grew steadily. So did my sense of direction. Whispers followed me in the hallways. Some girls turned away when I passed. Others offered pity, but I didn't let them see me flinch. On graduation day, I wore a loose dress and flats. My belly was unmistakable. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I didn't look into the crowd. I only looked toward the last row, where Mrs. Duval sat, clapping harder than anyone. That's the moment that stuck with me. Not the shame, not the fear, just the sound of her hands. Back in the present, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The drawer creaked open again. This time, my fingers moved deliberately. I tore open the envelope, a single note folded cleanly. My eyes found the handwriting first, then the words. They want to see you. Signed, Claire. My sister. I whispered, why now? But I already knew. The past never really disappears. It waits in quiet places, like handwriting on paper or the echo of footsteps outside a school door. Forgiveness isn't something you mail in. It doesn't come stamped or signed. It has to be lived, shown in silence, not shouted. I had learned that the hard way. Claire's note stayed on my nightstand for 3 days. I read it twice the night it arrived, once the next morning, and then I just left it there. I would pass it every day, pretending it was just another forgotten envelope. But my mind circled it like a loose thread, always aware, always tempted to pull. On the third evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, I picked up my phone and dialed the number I never deleted. Claire answered on the second ring. Ava. I leaned against the wall, heart steady but guarded. I got your note. A pause, then, thank you for calling. Her voice still sounded like mine, just slightly higher. Familiar in a way that a smell can be. Unexpected, nostalgic, but dangerous if you inhale too deep. You said they want to see me, I said. Why? She hesitated. Dad had heart surgery last month. It was complicated. He's okay now, but it scared him. And Mom? She's not the same either. Not since she started reading your name again. I didn't answer. My silence said enough. Claire added softly, They saw Ethan's art. The bakery near 6th Street. You left a piece there, right? I nodded, even though she couldn't see. A fall landscape. Ethan wanted to frame it. They saw his name, Ethan Montgomery. Dad asked if it was yours. I didn't lie. That doesn't mean they get to walk back in. I know. Do you? I asked. Because the last time I saw them, they closed a door behind me and didn't open it for 6 years. No one asked if I was breathing. No one sent a single card. And now, what? One painting and we're family again? Her voice cracked just a little. I'm not asking you to forget. I just thought maybe you'd want to see for yourself. I stayed quiet, staring out the kitchen window. Leaves drifted across the sidewalk below, oranges and yellows dancing like questions. Ethan doesn't even know they exist, I whispered. He deserves the choice, Claire said. So do you. I ended the call not with an answer, but a promise to think. That weekend, Ethan and I were painting small pumpkins on the balcony. He held up his with pride. It had glasses and a bow tie. This one's a teacher, he said. I smiled. What's he teach? Article. But only to animals. He dipped his brush again and paused. Mom? Yeah? Do I have grandparents? The question didn't come from nowhere. I knew he'd been wondering for a while. In books and shows, every kid had a grandparent baking cookies, handing down stories, clapping from the crowd. I swallowed. You do, but they live far away. Like on the other side of the country? Not that far. Then why don't we see them? His eyes were curious, not accusatory. I didn't have an easy answer. I just said, sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and it takes time to fix them. He nodded, as if that made enough sense to rest for now. The next morning, Claire texted, Would you meet me at Cedar and Clay Cafe? Just to talk. I stared at the message. Then, against the part of me still bruised, I replied, 1 hour. The cafe was quiet, tucked between a florist and a bookstore. I chose a booth near the window. Claire arrived 5 minutes later in a navy coat and soft eyes. We sat for a while, saying nothing, just sipping coffee like we didn't have history stitched between every breath. They want to invite you to the art fair, she said finally. They think it would mean something. To who? Them or me? To Ethan. I looked at her. I'm not walking into that room for them. I'm not doing this for redemption. I didn't expect you to. If I come, I said, it's because my son deserves to see where he came from, even if it's not where he belongs. Claire nodded. That's more than fair. When I returned home, Ethan was asleep on the couch, curled into a blanket he insisted wasn't warm enough until he was under it. I watched him breathe, the rise and fall like a tiny promise that whatever I chose next, it had to be for him. 2 days later, another envelope arrived. This one wasn't slipped under a door. It came by courier, hand-delivered to my mailbox with a signature required. The handwriting was unmistakable, Charles Montgomery. I took it inside, sat at the table, and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of thick paper, embossed with my father's initials in the corner. No long paragraph, no excuses, just a few lines in the same angular script that once signed my report cards. This is a portion of the trust fund you were meant to receive. If you're willing, I'd like to see you again. Not to explain, just to listen. There was a check inside, a sum that would cover Ethan's art supplies for years. Maybe college. But the money wasn't what made my hands shake. It was the signature at the bottom. Charles Montgomery, no title, no father, just a man trying to write a sentence he never learned in time. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer beside Claire's note. That night, I sat on the edge of Ethan's bed, brushing his hair away from his forehead as he drifted to sleep. His breathing was slow even, untouched by the weight I carried, and I whispered, not to him, but to the quiet. I'll go. But I'm going for him, not for them. I didn't walk in to make a scene. I walked in holding the hand of the only person I've never had to question. The front doors of the Asheville Community Arts Center stood wide open, framed by autumn leaves curling in gold and rust. Inside, soft string lights crisscrossed the ceiling, casting a gentle warmth over rows of framed paintings and tables with crisp, white linens. The scent of cinnamon cider drifted through the air, and somewhere in the distance, a string quartet tuned up with delicate chords. Ethan held my hand tightly, his little fingers fidgeting but firm. He wore a navy blue blazer over his favorite rocket ship shirt, because, as he'd insisted, You can be fancy and still believe in space. As we stepped onto the polished floors, I heard it. My last name, whispered softly, not spoken directly to me, but around me, like wind curling around a doorframe. Montgomery. Some faces turned. Some didn't recognize me at all. Others did and stared, not in cruelty, but in the kind of surprise that people save for ghosts and headlines. Claire appeared by the welcome table. "You came," she said, relief flooding her voice. I said I would. She leaned down and hugged Ethan. "You look very grown up." "I'm 5 3/4, he replied seriously, "and I brought my sketchbook." She smiled. "Then let me show you your table." The reserved sign sat beside a small bouquet of mums in copper and cream. Ethan slid into the seat immediately, pulling his sketchpad onto his lap under the tablecloth. He always drew when he needed to stay grounded. I took the seat beside him, eyes scanning the room. It was full. Artists, families, critics, teachers. Some I recognized. Some recognized me. Most didn't know what to say. I didn't expect them to. Across the room, my parents stood near a display of oil landscapes. My father wore a dark gray suit. My mother had a scarf draped across her shoulders, her fingers clutched tightly around a wine glass. They hadn't seen us yet, or maybe they had, and just didn't know what to do next. I focused on Ethan. He was drawing something in deep oranges and browns, his tongue peeking out in concentration. "Leaves falling," he whispered to himself, "but not all at once." A man with a white beard and wire glasses approached our table, holding a program folder in one hand. Claire appeared behind him. "Ava, this is Mr. Jasper Monroe," she said. "He writes for Canvas Weekly." Monroe nodded kindly, then noticed Ethan's sketchpad. "Mind if I take a peek?" Ethan looked up. "Okay, but I'm not finished yet." Monroe bent slightly and studied the drawing. It showed 2 small figures beneath a canopy of trees, one tall, one small. Leaves tumbled around them like confetti made of memory. "This is unusually emotive for his age," Monroe said. "Whose piece is this?" Ethan tapped his chest. "Mine. And you are?" "Ethan Montgomery." Monroe blinked and turned to me. "Montgomery? As in the gallery?" I paused. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice level. "Yes, I used to live in that house." His expression shifted. Not to judgment, but something gentler. Curiosity with a trace of respect. It shows. His eye for atmosphere, the emotional geometry. Remarkable. Before I could respond, another voice rose from across the room. "That's my grandson." The words cut through the music like a needle sliding off a record. All movement in the room paused, just for a second, but it was long enough for everyone to look. At me, at Ethan, at the man now walking slowly across the polished floor. Charles Montgomery. He stopped a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, his eyes steady but uncertain. For the first time in years, he didn't look like a man controlling the temperature of a room. He looked like someone who'd just stepped into weather he couldn't predict. Ethan looked up at me. "That's him?" he asked softly. I nodded. "Yes, that's Grandpa." There was no dramatic embrace, no monologue, just the quiet hum of recognition settling into the room like dust. Claire stepped closer to me, her voice low. "I didn't know he would say something. He's trying." I didn't answer, because just then, another sound broke the silence, the clink of a wine glass set down too quickly. Vivian Montgomery walked forward slowly. Her scarf slipped from one shoulder. Her heels were careful, measured, like each step required permission. She didn't look at me at first. She looked at Ethan. "Would it be all right," she said, her voice almost trembling, "if I sat with you for a while?" Ethan looked at me, unsure. His eyes searched mine for a cue. I didn't tell him yes. I didn't tell him no. I just said, "It's up to you, sweetheart." He turned back to her, then pointed to the empty chair beside him. "Okay, but only if you like rockets." Vivian blinked, then smiled. Not the practiced smile I remembered from years of charity events and press photos, but a real one. Fragile, but trying. "I think I can learn," she said, lowering herself gently into the seat. Around us, the room resumed breathing. The music picked back up. Conversations restarted. But for me, time still felt strange, like someone had pulled back a curtain I didn't know was there. I sat, watching my mother speak softly to Ethan while he explained the different engines he'd drawn. I caught words like booster and heat shield and color blending, and I realized, for the first time in a long time, no one was pretending. Not her. Not me. Not even the boy between us whose curiosity had already begun building bridges without asking anyone for blueprints. Some doors, once shut, shouldn't be knocked on again, especially if you were the one who slammed them. The night had settled gently over the Asheville Community Arts Center, wrapping the brick building in shadows and mist. The crowd had thinned to clusters of soft conversation and lingering goodbyes. String lights above flickered slightly in the breeze, and the scent of mulled cider had given way to cool October rain. Ethan and I sat on a side bench just outside the main gallery near a small installation titled Dreams of Tomorrow. It was a series of paintings by children, rockets, unicorns, glowing forests, and one sketch of a smiling grandmother baking pies in a floating kitchen. Ethan pointed to that one and giggled. "Grandma doesn't even bake." "No," I smiled, "but maybe she could learn." He leaned against me, tired but content. My heels pinched, and my coat barely held out the damp, but I didn't care. The moment was still, until I heard my name. "Ava." The voice came from the entrance. My stomach recognized it before my ears did. Dylan Reyes stood beneath the archway, hands in his coat pockets. The drizzle slicked his hair back, his shoes shined too perfectly for the weather. He wore a wool trench coat, and his posture was just as I remembered. Confident, composed, but never fully settled, like he was always performing for an invisible audience. He stepped closer, tentative. "It's really you." I rose slowly, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "What are you doing here?" "I read about the art fair. I saw your name. And Ethan's." His eyes dropped to the boy beside me, studying him. "He looks just like you." "That's not an answer." "I wanted to see you, and him. I thought maybe it was time." "Time for what?" My voice stayed calm. "For apologies or introductions?" He winced. "I never stopped thinking about you. But you stopped calling. You stopped caring when it counted." Dylan looked down. "I was scared, Ava. I was 18, broke, and barely holding on. New York University was everything." "So was that night on the school bench," I replied, "when I sat through a storm with nowhere to go. I called you hoping you'd say something, anything. Instead, you told me I'd be fine. Then you hung up. I didn't know what else to say." "You didn't say enough." The rain began to pick up, misting our coats. Ethan stayed still beside me, his little fingers now wrapped around the bench's metal slat. Dylan took a step forward. "Look, I don't expect to walk in and get everything, but I want to be part of his life." I shook my head. "You don't get to say that now. You weren't there for the sleepless nights, the doctor visits, the art supplies bought with bakery tips. You weren't there when he cried and asked why he didn't have a dad. I'm here now." "No," I said, quietly but firmly. "You're here because you saw a photo in the paper. That doesn't make you a father. It makes you a reader." Dylan's jaw tightened. "I have rights." At that moment, a shadow emerged behind him. Charles Montgomery stepped out from the gallery doors, his coat collar turned up, his steps measured. "You had your chance," he said. His voice didn't rise, but the weight in it settled the air. 6 years ago, you walked away. You don't get to come back just because you changed your mind." Dylan turned, surprised. "I didn't come here to fight." "But you did come here to take," Charles replied, "and she's not giving." Dylan looked back at me. "Is this really how you want it?" "Yes," I said, "and if you push, I'll go further. I have the hospital records, the school forms, the absence of your name on every document. I have witnesses, statements. I even have the last text you sent me. If I need to protect my son in court or in the press, I will." He blinked. "I will tell the world about the boy who got a scholarship and left his pregnant girlfriend on a park bench in the rain." Dylan's mouth opened, then closed. The polish cracked. For a moment, I saw the 18-year-old again, the one too scared to stay. He stepped back. "I didn't know you'd grow up like this." "I had no choice." He nodded faintly. "Tell him I—" He stopped. "Actually, don't." And then he walked away. The street lamp cast a pale gold halo around him as he disappeared into the night, umbrella unopened, hands buried in his pockets. I turned back to Ethan, who had watched the entire thing in silence. "Mom? Yes, sweetheart? Who was that?" I sat beside him again. "Someone who never showed up when it mattered." Ethan thought for a second. "Oh, okay." He pulled out his sketchbook and began drawing raindrops falling on rockets. Beside me, Charles remained quiet. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. And in that stillness, I realized something simple but powerful. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was choosing what stayed, what left, and who I let in, on purpose. You can't erase abandonment, but sometimes you can paint over it with patience and presence. Saturday mornings always started the same way. The scent of instant coffee in a travel mug, the creak of the community center's side door, and the sound of Ethan humming a tune he never quite finished. But this morning, as I unlocked the classroom and turned on the lights, I paused. 2 chairs had been added at the back of the room. I didn't ask who placed them. I didn't need to. Ethan tugged at my coat. "Do you think they'll come?" I looked down at him. "They said they would." That answer used to mean very little. These days, it meant a little more. By 8:45, the first few kids had arrived. Paints clinked in their plastic trays, aprons were tied, and Ethan sharpened colored pencils like it was a sacred ritual. At 9:01, the door opened. Charles Montgomery stepped in, carrying a worn leather sketchbook. He nodded at me. No fanfare, no explanation. He walked to the back, placed the sketchbook on the table, and began setting out paper towels and fresh water cups. His movements were deliberate, quiet. Not a man seeking redemption, just one learning how to be useful again. 10 minutes later, Vivian appeared. She wore a soft wool coat and carried a thermos of apple cider. Under her arm were 2 thin books, one about a bear who loved stars, and another about a little boy who built a treehouse with his grandmother. Ethan spotted her and waved. She waved back, hesitant but smiling. He brought her a coloring page and sat beside her. She read aloud, pausing when he interrupted with questions like, "Can bears really climb ladders?" Or, "Do grandmas get scared of heights?" From across the room, I watched as her voice softened and her body relaxed. This wasn't the woman who once stood at the top of a staircase, demanding I leave. This was someone else, someone newer, or perhaps older, but different. Around mid-morning, Mr. Monroe stopped by. He took a moment to admire a display of Ethan's recent pieces, swirling skies, abstract trees, and one that looked suspiciously like a robot building a snowman. Monroe knelt beside Ethan. "I'm organizing an exhibit at the Children's Museum downtown. Would you want to share one of these?" Ethan blinked. "Even the robot one?" "Especially the robot one." Ethan looked at me. I didn't answer. I just raised my eyebrows. He nodded shyly. "Okay." Later that evening, we gathered in our apartment for a small dinner. Not quite Thanksgiving, but it had the scent of one. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and Claire's slightly overcooked pumpkin pie filled the table. The dining chairs didn't match, and the tablecloth had a faint paint stain Ethan insisted looked like a butterfly, but it was warm. Vivian brought a jar of homemade cranberry sauce. Claire poured cider. Mrs. Duval, who arrived just before dessert, slipped Ethan a new set of watercolor brushes with a wink. Dinner was a patchwork of small conversations. Ethan explaining his art like a curator, Vivian asking about the museum's hours, Charles quietly passing plates and refilling glasses. No speeches, no dramatic toasts, until Ethan raised his plastic cup, the one with dinosaurs on it. "I don't need any presents," he said, with the quiet solemnity of a 5-year-old. "I just want everyone here next year, too." No one said anything for a moment. Then Claire reached for his hand and nodded. "Me too." After dessert, Vivian asked, "Would it be all right if I hung one of Ethan's paintings in the hallway? Just a small one, maybe the one with the yellow trees." Ethan beamed. "The one with the secret fox?" "Yes," she smiled. "The secret fox." Later, I tucked Ethan into bed. The apartment was still filled with the soft sounds of dishes clinking and chairs being moved. I turned off his lamp and he rolled over, voice muffled in his pillow. "Mom?" "Yes, baby." "Are we a family now?" I sat beside him, brushing hair from his forehead. The question hung in the air like the last light of evening. "We're becoming one," I whispered. He nodded, already half asleep. Outside, the wind shook the bare branches, but inside, the room was still. That night, as I turned off the lights and watched Ethan sleep, his words echoed in my mind. "Are we a family now?" And maybe we weren't quite there yet, but we were finally painting toward it, one gentle stroke at a time. Sometimes the people who hurt us aren't ready to say sorry in the way we imagined, but healing isn't always loud. It can be quiet moments, setting out an extra chair, reading a book aloud, showing up when no one asks you to. In life, love doesn't always arrive on time, but if it does return, even late, it deserves a chance to prove itself, not through grand gestures, but through presence, again and again. If this story touched something in you, perhaps a memory, a wound, or a hope, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you're still waiting for someone to show up, just know, sometimes family is what we choose to build back.